Hi VC, James here. Welcome to another video. We're listening to one of the Henry Mancini albums that I bought a while ago from a charity shop. This one apparently is a soundtrack to a set of films, or some short films that were compiled together, all about the Olympics in 1972. The film was put together by there was various directors: Milos Forman, Kon Ishikawa, Claude Lelouch. Anyway, they were sort of knocked together into this film, and Henry Mancini did the music for it. Nice album. Okay, so this is a Vinyl Finds video with a difference. I'm reporting back after the first, I say the first, is it the first? I don't know. VC meetup, February the 10th, 2018 was the day that several British VCers met up in Manchester to go to a record fair. Music's getting a bit loud, going to turn it down. The idea was originally mooted for a get-together by John Downing, 6-inch pianist, who contacted me actually with a view to just going for a pint. Then John invited Hedley. Hedley, we mentioned it to Hedley, another fat bearded man talking about records, and he happened to know of a record fair that was happening round about the time that we were thinking about meeting up. So we thought, okay, good idea. And then it kind of snowballed after that, because there were various people who I thought might like to get involved. So I invited, I kind of put the word out, and a few people came forward to say they'd like to come. Steve Whitty and Chris Barron, that's merely Chris. It looked for a while like John Bellamy was going to come, then it turned out he couldn't make it, but Martin Parrot said he was going to join us. So it was kind of shaping up to be quite an event, and I think we were all looking forward to it, and it was a really great experience. I'll just kind of quickly talk you through what happened from my point of view. It was slightly weird from my point of view because I was suffering with an abscess under my tooth, and in fact the day after the record fair I had to have an emergency appointment to have my tooth extracted. And in fact I left the fair for about 5 minutes in order to make a phone call to the emergency dental clinic where I live, and I was necking painkillers all afternoon. So it was a slightly strange afternoon for me, but it was still just a great afternoon, just a great opportunity to finally meet some people from the VC. The first time I'd ever actually done that, and we were all converging by train or coach on Manchester, apart from Martin, who was travelling up by car from near where he lives down south. So Steve was coming in on the coach, National Express, from the West Midlands. John was coming from the West Midlands also by train. I was coming from Lancashire by train, and Hedley, I think, was coming from West Yorkshire by train. And me, Hedley and John were all kind of arriving at Manchester Piccadilly at roughly the same time. And we didn't end up meeting up at the station. Our trains didn't exactly coincide, and we each made our way down there. So I got into Manchester. There was a fair walk to the record fair, and doing a bit of navigating. And the first person I saw at the hotel, because it was being held in a hotel in Manchester, I kind of went through, and there was a guy taking tickets at the door, and I was just standing there waiting to go in, and I'd kind of looked up and I saw Steve Whitty standing there smiling, and I went in, met Steve straight away, and Chris as well, who was there, and then John. I think John was next, or maybe Hedley was next. I can't remember, but within about 10 minutes of kind of arriving at the hotel, we were all together, and it was a fantastic experience, and a slightly strange one. I think John said, it's odd when you've been talking to people and conversing with people for a long time on YouTube and social media, so you feel like you know them in a way, but then when you meet them, you realise that you haven't known them exactly. You've never met them before. So, but they're not strangers. They're people that you know, and they're friends. And that's the really amazing thing about it. The way that when we met, we all clicked, which is kind of what you'd hope for. I mean, it'd be awful to have this kind of long-term online friendship and then find that you couldn't stand each other. But that was far from the case. So Chris knew of a pub a little drinking hole because he'd been to Manchester before and been to this place. So after the record fair, we all went to this little pub and kind of sat in a corner and kind of drank the afternoon away. You know, no food, just a liquid lunch they call it. And we chatted and got to know each other, and we kind of spoke about the VC and just all kinds of things, finding out about each other a bit more. And if you've not done it and you're involved in the VC in whatever capacity, whether you're just a commenter or whether you're a person who makes videos or whatever, I strongly recommend the act of hooking up is absolutely amazing. I mean, I spoke to John about it. We were kind of standing at the bar, and I said, it almost, I don't want to make it sound negative, but it almost legitimises it. There's a kind of certain thing, a certain taboo amongst whatever, like normal people, in inverted commas, that kind of, online relationships and social media is in some way kind of one step removed from proper friendships. But it was quite amazing the way we kind of met up and it felt like we were friends, but friends who were yet to meet but were now meeting. And just the thought that you can sort of sit in your room in this kind of slightly strange, isolated situation where you're making videos and you're talking into nothing in a way. You're kind of talking to camera and hoping people will listen. To go from there to a situation where you're actually in the pub with real people, real friends, and you've got phone numbers and it's just incredible. It blows my mind, really. It's not something that I ever expected in a million years when I started making videos. It was it didn't figure at all in my consciousness as to that being a possibility. But now it's happened, and we've got the VC to thank for that. So just amazing. Anyway, yeah. So we went to the record fair, and it was quite a big fair. I hadn't been to a record fair for many years. The last one I'd gone to was roughly, I'd say, kind of early to mid 90s, back when I lived in Leeds. Hadn't been to one since then, and I'd forgotten how kind of overwhelming they were. I mean, tons and tons of records, and it came at a funny time for me because I have been splurging a lot on records of late, and so I felt like my appetite for buying records was perhaps slightly blunted, coupled with the fact that I was suffering with this tooth complaint. But I wasn't quite with it. I was kind of wandering around. I do have some very, very brief bits of footage, so let's just quickly show you that. Just a really, really quick bit of John there because I had to turn the camera off for some reason. I think somebody knocked me. So you can get a quick glance at the fair, Lots and lots of records, some very expensive things. I'd gone in there with a deliberate strategy not to spend too much money, and I was saying to Chris that I was doing what I now normally do when I browse for records. I actually look at the price first, and then if the price is good, I actually let my eyes drift across to see who the record is by. It's a strange topsy-turvy way of doing it, but that's just what I do. I just look at prices and see what things are going to be within my price range, and then see if I'm interested in them. And that's kind of what I did. I didn't go mad. I stuck mainly to the cheap bins. There were records there for, I think somebody said, Steve maybe said the most expensive record he'd seen there was a Black Sabbath Vertigo Swirl that was going for about £360 or something. So there was a lot of expensive stuff there. There was mid-price stuff, and then there was cheap stuff, and most of the stuff I bought was cheap. In the first bin that I went to, I picked up this album, Still Caught Up, by Millie Jackson, which was her fifth album, released in 1975, and it was the sequel to the album Caught Up. A kind of deep soul classic, and it's on Red Polydor. I've got it on CD. Now, it's quite complicated, this. So it includes the hit single Loving Arms.
If you could see me now, she would rather roam. The one who said...
It's a sequel to her previous album, Caught Up. Now that one told the story of a woman having an affair with a married man. Still Caught Up reprises its themes of adultery and recrimination. But where side A of Caught Up featured Jackson singing from the mistress's point of view and side B from the jilted wife's point of view, Still Caught Up begins with the wife on side A and concludes with the mistress on side B. So there's quite an interesting conceit in the album. It's a kind of narrative told from various different people, well, two different people's points of view, telling the story of this adulterous affair. Anyway, it's a record that I knew and loved. I don't actually have Caught Up yet, so I'll be on the lookout for that. But that one was a nice find at, I think it was £3. I also picked up from the same seller this record, which I knew about their partnership, but I don't think I knew the name of the record. This is Patrick Moraz and Bill Bruford. Patrick Moraz, who became a member of the Moody Blues in a kind of midpoint of their career, I think. He wasn't one of the original Burning Man members. Bill Bruford, of course, drummer with Yes and King Crimson. This is a record they made in 1983, which was, I think, at least partly improvised. It was a duo album. Bruford on drums, obviously. Patrick Moraz, who is a very virtuosic pianist, keyboard player. It's very, very sort of high classical fusion. I don't like a lot of jazz fusion music, and this record is a little bit fiddly. It's got some moments on it which are quite, quite technical. But it's also got some quite exciting playing as well. And I thought it was a record that was worth picking up, and I've enjoyed what I've heard of it so far. So yeah, Bill Bruford and Patrick Moraz, music for piano and drums. I also picked up another Youssou N'Dour album. On my last Vinyl Finds video I showed Immigré. This is the sequel to that, produced in 1989. Apparently this was the album that made him seeing some kind of serious inroads into being an international pop star, rock star. It features a duet with Peter Gabriel called Shaking the Tree.
You don't have to do what your mother has done. She has done. This is your life. This new life has begun. It's your day.
That was a nice one to find. That was in the £2 boxes. Youssou had actually been on the album So with Peter Gabriel, so they had a kind of friendship there already, a musical partnership. And then just two kind of fun finds to finish up with. I picked up a copy of Rotre Graveur by Ringo. You know, Ringo is a person who I'm not that serious about collecting. His career is very checkered. John mentioned to me that he'd actually owned this album and had given it away. You know, I've heard mixed things about it. I know there are certain people in the Beatles vinyl community who actually quite like this record, and I'm kind of curious. I've never heard it all the way through, and it was only a couple of pounds, so I grabbed that. That was the last thing I picked up actually on the way out. And the final thing I picked up at the fair that I'm going to show you is Hotter Than Hell, which is an album which I've wanted to own for a very long time. I bought all the original Kiss albums back in the day when I was kind of a kid, really, or a teenager. And for some reason, this one always eluded me. And as I got into kind of adulthood, I'd never seen it at a good price. This one is some kind of 80s repress. I haven't established exactly yet, but it was in really nice condition, and it cost me £13, which I thought was a reasonable price for an album of this vintage. And it's quite funny because nobody else there, apart from Steve Whitty likes Kiss, but nobody else really likes Kiss. Kiss are one of those bands that you get or you don't, But there was some conversation in the pub afterwards. I think a couple of people, John and maybe Hedley, were saying that they mainly associate Kiss with the kind of 80s hair metal line-up and that incarnation of the band, whereas this, of course, is very early Kiss, when they still quite raw and rough sounding. And in fact, this record is abysmally produced. It's produced by Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise, and technically it's an absolutely dreadful recording. I mean, it has the worst drum sound ever put to tape, but it's got some great early Kiss tracks. Things like look, we don't have the track list in English there. I have to remind myself now what those tracks are. All the Way, Got to Choose, Parasite, Going Blind.
I think I'm going blind, and I know how it should be.
Proto Kiss. A nice one to pick up. I just couldn't resist it. So then, after the fair, we popped to another shop, that being Vinyl Revival in Manchester, which I had been to before. I'm not going to say too much about these records now because I'm going to feature them in a Hunting Al Stewart Through the Wild video, which I'm going to make quite soon. But I picked up a copy of Time Passages by Al Stewart. I am collecting Al Stewart records, like I said, but I'll talk about that more in a future video, which hopefully won't be too long in the future. And then Chris was kind enough to point this one out to me. I hadn't seen it and he spotted it in the rack, so I grabbed that one as well. So yeah, after the pub, well, Steve and I were the first to leave. Steve went to catch his bus, I went to catch a train. I was feeling quite poorly by the end of the afternoon with my tooth, and it was a bit rough on the way home. I didn't get a seat on the train. I was kind of standing up and everything, and I was in a lot of pain when I got home. And the next morning I went down to the emergency clinic and I had my tooth out. So I kind of wish that hadn't been going on, because I did really enjoy the experience of meeting up with everybody, but I'd like to do it again now, you know, and not be putting up with all that. But anyway, I just thought I would show you what I got at the fair and tell you how it went. And like I said before, if you're involved with the VC and haven't done any kind of meetup, I strongly recommend that you give it a try, because it's a very special experience to meet people that you've already bonded with in that weird kind of virtual space, which is YouTube. And it was a positive experience in every way, and I can't wait to do it again. So hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back soon for more videos, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.
And we nearly ended up with another one. My wife wanted another one to keep the other one company, because our one likes me more than her. Yeah. And this cat turned up and it was making a horrendous noise.
All right, Steve.
Goat cat.